Does it show that I'm recording? There we are. All righty. So, Brother Mark, you can kick us off. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for this opportunity to get together and to study your word. These wonderful people that are here today have it in their heart to study your word and to learn more about it so that they can actually walk in obedience to your word. And at the same time, we want to pray for our Israeli brothers with the turmoil that's going on there and the poor people that are being kidnapped and tortured. So, Heavenly Father, we'd ask that you would place your mercy upon them and bring them back home and protect not only the civilians on the Israeli side, but the civilians on the Palestinian side, and that the evil that's perpetrated against Israel, you would stop it completely, Father. In your precious holy name we pray. Amen.
Let me throw in also, I understand Kurt was in the hospital, so we should, y'all please be mindful of Kurt. Look at him and heal him. And one of the guys that was on this, listening to the talks for quite a few years, Joe Mulrooney from Florida, he actually died. I think it was a week ago now.
Wow.
And so he hasn't been on the last couple of weeks. I was just talking to his wife, Susie. So, Yahweh, please be with Susie. Anyway, certainly stuff happens, but our hope is in Yahuwah, which is a big thing. Anyway, we're continuing with Eliyah. So this would be 15 pieces 15 and 16. This business with this hat, I was working on this other hat band. This isn't finished yet, it's too big. But basically, on the headband of the high priest was written Kadosh La Yahweh. But here it's Kadosh Ani La Yahuwah Elhi Zavot. And then the blue, purple, red, white, gold. The idea is to make this available. This particular size is, I think, looks too big for the hat band, but it looks real nice above a door. So I was going to make these available. Just to say, if anybody needs the charts, various charts, Diana up in Montana, who is the one who gets the various graphics made at the copy center there, said that not too many people have been requesting anything. So if anybody wants the chart or the array or the various different graphics, it's at Erictology Prints, Prints, at gmail.com. Email her and she can get these things made. Another thing that I was working on this week is you all saw probably, I showed people the black and white version of this that I had done previously. That's the making a sticker out of it. And basically in blue here are the words that are written. And basically we had never taken the time to go over this, but there was this, which is a sculpture that somebody had made. It says it was bought in Israel. And it's like, well, they've turned letters into a sculpture. This looks like the top of a candle. This is the shape of a flame. So incorporated into the shape of the sculpture is words. And there was a third item, I can't remember what it was, that we had talked about going through one of these days. And here's the letter Mem, written in modern Hebrew. Ayin, this would be a Vav, and this is Zion. So it was Ma'uz, like where we get the word moose, Ma'uzi, which would be a fortress, a citadel, a refuge. And this is Zadi Vav Resh, so it would be Zor. So Mitzra'i Mem Zadi Resh Yod Mem is oppression rocks between a rock and a hard place, so it's straits of confine, pressed and squeezed so you can't move. You got to get some relief. Or it's so Zadi Vavresh is to be wrapped up like a mummy, confined, or it's a play. It's the word for. It's not creator like Bet-Resh Aleph, but it's the creator like an artist, somebody who's making something. Is a derivative of that word. And then here's Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin, Yeshua, Tav, Yod, Yeshua T, which would be the Tav, Yod suffix means I have or I will. So Yod prefix is like the third person, so he will. But see, that's not always true. It's not always he will third person. I've seen Yod prefix translated a number of different ways. And so any of these things that I'm talking about, the way I can see it is just to get up to speed as fast as possible. It's not learning exact appropriate grammatical syntax the way the language is used today. Just so you know, it's what I've found is that if I'm thinking the Yod prefix is third person pushing into the future, he will, okay, then that gives me a basis, a bearing for which to run with the words. Yeshua T. He will, well, if the Yod suffix is at the end, does that save me? But I've seen Tav Yod as a suffix at the end written as I will or I have, like I've already done it or I will do it. So it's not a present state. And I've heard people say that in Hebrew, it's not past, present, and future. That's English. You might say the syntax, the way of thinking, the way of building the Hebrew consciousness is that it's either present state happening or it's not present state. Well, if it's not present state, it could be either the past or the future. And it's kind of like it doesn't matter. You could say, what do you mean it doesn't matter? Of course it matters. That's what, no. See, the way I think, I've been trained to think in past, present, future. And some could say, well, that's linear thought. And then other people have said, well, linear thought is Greek thought. Greek, I think got nothing to do with Greek. Well, Greco-Roman or Western culture goes all the way back to at least about 500 BC. That was the era of Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, a guy named Anaximander, and Pythagoras. Well, those, you might say, those are the heavyweight forefathers of Greek or Greco-Roman, what became Roman Latin culture for the next couple thousand years. And besides what's happening in the Orient, the Eastern, this is called Occidental or Western, and that's my only frame of reference. So I was raised with this Occidental Greco-Roman mindset, which is somehow different than the Eastern. And yet I couldn't even tell you how, because I haven't studied the Eastern. And I suppose if you were to look at what I might classify as religious philosophy, and that's the only way I can describe it, which would be what, maybe Buddhist or Hindu or Taoist, or all they know is these strange words from whether it's Japan or Korea or China or Indonesia or something. It's like those guys over there. I don't know the way they think, and I can't appropriate correctly or fairly, justly. I can't say what those guys are thinking. All I know is that it's somehow different than the way I think. Now, there was I think it was maybe on the internet, probably 10, 15 years ago. I live in around Portland, Oregon, and supposedly in the world of cultural exchange, there's a sister city in Japan called Kyoto, and that's apparently a sister city with Portland. Cultural exchange, arts, whatever. And there's a thing in Kyoto in the spring that they call the Gion Festival, Gion. It's like they have parades and big whoop-de-doo. And It's a, you might say, kind of a cultural expression from history over the centuries. So not only, like I lived in Los Angeles, and they have the Rose Parade, New Year's Day, every early in the morning, people camp out overnight, and it's a big whoop-de-doo, and they've got all these floats. They put roses and other flowers and everything, and there's rules about this Rose Parade, but it's like the thing for Los Angeles, and it's filmed and videoed and put all around the world. Well, so this Gion festival in Kyoto is the same type of a thing, but for some strange reason, even though it's Japanese culture, this article was saying that they had some Middle Eastern motif going on. It's like, where do you get Middle Eastern motif as a cultural heritage for Kyoto, Japan? And somebody went and did some investigation. I believe an Israeli ambassador went over there and started talking to people, looking around. And it turns out that, see, when I think, because of my cultural background, that the northern 10 tribes of Israel, which are not the same as the southern 2 tribes, making a total of 12. Well, it's actually more like 13, because Joseph, the one man who was the patriarch, the father of what became his tribe, had 2 sons, well, with an Egyptian wife, and he named them Ephraim and Manasseh. And then Jacob, Joseph's father, crossed his hands over him and blessed them. And Joseph tried to correct him. He says, no, I know what I'm doing. This is on purpose. It's like, why did he do this? And I saw a picture of once of some lady sitting like this, got her photographed, and she's saying she's, signifying the emblem of the covenant. It's like, how is she doing that? Well, if you don't know Paleo Hebrew, you got no idea. Is it just that Jacob crossed his hands when he blessed the 2 lads? Why is the lady sitting like this? Well, that's the Paleo letter Tav, which is a sign, simply means a sign or a mark, like a symbol, like an Alef Lamed Tav, an oath, which is an oath, which is a statement which projects the intent of agreement to some previously stated stipulations. That's the definition of Alef Lamed Tav. That's the letter Tav, then, is this symbol of a bunch of other ideas simply wrapped up in an X. And so when you sign a contract, even in America, they put an X and sign your name here. And if you're unable to write, if you have a certain type of illiteracy, crippled hand, or you never learned to sign your name, you can just simply write some kind of a crude X. And what that means is, I assent. I'm with this. I'm now a participant in the contract. So Ephraim, Manasseh, well, if you had Joseph making 12 tribes, that makes 13 tribes with Ephraim and Manasseh. But Levites didn't have an inheritance in the land, so they're almost kind of kicked aside as being one of the landowners, anyway, of the 12 tribes. But technically there's 13. And then there's this question of the Ashkenazi, the Khazarians, and that's, it's almost like a 14th tribe. But then if you're going to play that game, you could say, well, what about the proselytes, the strangers, those who live in the neighborhood of the Israelites, say like in Egypt? They heard about the Israelite deity. They saw the 10 plagues. And when the Exodus happened and the El Elyon, the Almighty, the Most High, Elyon would be Ayin Lamed Yod Vav Nun. So Yod Vav Nun is the suffix of Ayin Lamed, which is to be raised up. So Elyon is generally translated the Most High. And Abraham had regard of Alef Lamed, which would be El, Elyon, translated in English, God Most High. It's like, I hate even mentioning the word God as a direct translation of El. Better to say El, Al, which is very similar to that Allah of the Islam. And it's like, why do they call him that? Well, even in Hebrew, Alef Lamed Hei is the reference of a deity, or to deify is Alef Lamed Hei. And as a word, Alef Lamed Hei means these. So the word Allah in Hebrew is like saying God, but it's also just pointing at something and saying these. Of course, the word Zion Hay or Zayin Aleph Tav also means this, to point to something. So again, it's a matter of like, if you understand the way people think who are using the language, then you realize that the language kind of is not locked in solid figures of this means this equals this, but it's kind of loose, it's unstable, and the words mean a few different things. And you gotta, if you're going to translate, or if you're going to try to understand a certain passage, you got to get the, you might call it even the interpretation. What's it trying to tell me? Not just what does it say. If I say, what does it say? I can look at a dictionary and say, give me the exact dictionary definition. And then you get a word like Shinai and Resh, and boy, it's got a dozen completely different meanings. Like, for example, it means goat. It means hairy, like a hairy goat. It means a goal, like goalpost in a football field. It means a gateway or an entrance. It's like, well, why should one word mean all these different things? And so this study that what I've tried to do is, when a word has a dozen different meanings, take them all into consideration and saying, now, what is the central core, like the neutron of this word, such that all the definitions around it are actually like an electron swarm, a field of electrons buzzing all around, none of which, let's say the neutron core, using the model of an atom as a model, as a figure, Zadi Resh kind of concept, picturesque. If the neutron, if the essence of the reality of the word is invisible, incomprehensible, meaning you can't grab it and say, this is what it is, kind of like the Aleph, you can't identify an Aleph. That's why it's silent and it's inexpressible. As soon as you express it and draw a picture of an Aleph, it's no longer an Aleph, it's in bet form. Aleph is by definition so elusive, it cannot be uttered or described. It has no face, has no voice. So if Elohim speaking, is that the Aleph or is that the bet? If you can comprehend it, it's put in bet form, because the Aleph is too remote, too unfathomable, unapproachable. And so if Yeshua says nobody's ever seen Elohim, but yes, Moshe spoke with him face to face, what's going on? There's a mystery going on there, and the mystery apparently is Yahusha is the bet format of the Aleph of Yahuwah, Abba Yahuwah being this Aleph, Yeshua is this bet. So my way of rationalizing this conundrum is to say, okay, if our obligation is to worship the Aleph form without form, and the Aleph appears in bet form, then if we worship the bet form, we're wrong, because we're supposed to be worshiping the Aleph, but we don't see or hear or comprehend the Aleph. What he gave us was the bet to point us at the Aleph. And so the bet is like the Aleph bet. The Aleph bet, the 22 letters of the Aleph bet. Bet means in, and it's the word for house. And so the concept of bet is the house that all the other letters are in, including the Aleph. But bet is not what we worship. And so if Yahusha's the Aleph made corporeal, of matter of substance, as a human walking around, so we can, hey, engage him, we can't be worshiping that man, that object, because that's misalignment of our worship. We should be worshiping the invisible, unfathomable Aleph. That's the best I can describe it, because that's what I see written in the code of the Aleph bet. So you going back to this Japanese Gion festival, why would they have Middle Eastern themed floats or in the parade or whatever, not just one, but I mean a bunch of things, because that's tied into their culture. Well, how did it get there? Well, if I go back to the northern 10 tribes, Yahuwah separated. He said, right after Solomon was king, he died and handed the kingdom to Rehoboam, his son. And yet Rehoboam persisted in the heathenism, false gods, Elohim Achrim. And so Yahuwah said he was going to take it away from him. So Yahuwah himself picked a fellow by the name of Jeroboam. So now these are contemporaries. Rehoboam, king of the south, Jeroboam, no letter J, so it'd be Jeroboam. he said, I'm going to give you the northern kingdom. And if you walk in my ways, I'll give you the same promise of a future dynasty that I gave David. And I'll limit David's dynasty to the southern kingdom, Judah. And I will give you, Mr. Jeroboam, the same promise of a long-lasting dynasty of your people, your family genetics ruling the northern 10 tribes. But you got to walk in my ways. That's the requirement, just like David. Well, the first thing that happened that's recorded is Jeroboam said, okay, and so there was a picture of a guy having Rehoboam, the corner of his garment being ripped, and the prophet said, okay, this is a picture of the northern 10 tribes being ripped out of your control, out of your jurisdiction, your governorship, and they're now a separate kingdom. And of course, hey, we're not going to let this pass. We're going to have a big war. So Judah geared up to arm up to attack the northern 10 tribes who had now seceded. And then Elohim stepped in and said, no, you don't. This is of me. You step down, boys, and you leave those guys alone. And it's like, what? It's kind of like the American Civil War, where the entire south half of the country seceded from the north, and Abraham Lincoln wouldn't tolerate that. He went to a gruesome war to retain the unification of the North American continent, you might say. The Federal versus the Confederacy is what it was known as, the blue coats against the gray coats. But that same type of thing was happening in Israel, in the land of Israel. And so the northern 10 tribes became simply known as Israel, and the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and then there was Levites floating around in both, but that became known as simply Judah. So it wasn't that the people of Israel were the entire land, although occasionally the word Israel or the children of Israel or the children of the sons of Jacob were referring to the collection of the all 12, but it was the house of Judah was referred to as the southern kingdom, and the house of Israel is referred to as the northern 10. And I'm saying this because I've talked to quite a few people who know nothing of this history. And to me, it's like, well, of course, everybody knows this. No, they don't. They don't know this. It's a completely foreign culture. And there's no reason why they should know it or have ever heard it, because it has nothing to do with their faith. It has nothing to do with the history as a people, because America is the favored God-blessed Christian country on the face of the earth, and blah, blah, blah. And then you got the Jews over there and the messing around in the land right now, and it's a whole different story. And it's like, wait a minute. There's even in the New Testament, it says, if those who come to the faith in Yahweh as their Elohim, or El-He, Yahweh El-He, Yahuwah El-He. See, in Zechariah 13:9, he said he's going to take the city of Jerusalem is going to be engulfed in war, and 2/3 are going to die. And Yahweh says, I'm going to take 1/3. The word is bet, Alef Shin. Well, the letter bet is a prefix. Alef Shin is the word ash or fire. It's pronounced ash, like fire burning things down to ash. But the letter bet can mean in, on, with, among, and through, or into. So if it's ba'ash, it can be read as into the fire, but it can also mean coming through the fire. Like if you take something to smelt or to refine, silver, gold, or some sort of metallurgy action, you take the metal and you put it in the fire and you heat it up and you get the dross out of it, the impurities, and then you take it out of the fire, and now it's what you're looking for as a product. And that's what he's going to do with 1/3 of the people. And those people, as I said, if you're going to learn any Hebrew words, learn these two words. Yahuwah El-He. Yahweh, Yod suffix means my Allah. Elah, Elai. There's an English band by the name of Eloi back in the 70s. I can't remember what any of their music was at this point, but I had a couple of their albums. But Eloi comes from the book Time Machine. Was it H.G. Wells, I think, wrote that book? But anyway, the Eloi were the privileged elite living on the surface of the land. The Morlocks were living underneath. It's like, where did he come up with these words, Morlock and Eloi? Those were just names of two people groups. But the Morlocks were like the peasants, the working class that lived underground in the caves with machinery and making everything function. And the Eloi lived pleasant and comfortable. Well, the Morlocks were farming the Eloi like sheep. At night, they'd go up there and grab one and bring it down and barbecue it and eat it. But where do we get Morlock? More like mortality, like dead, and lock, you're locked in, like you're trapped, you're locked into a death. And Eloi comes from this word Elohim, which is deific, godlike. So what I'm trying to say is that wrapped up into the culture, even in England and America, we have these Hebrew words that we don't even know they're Hebrew words. But people who know Hebrew have written them into books and songs because there's a certain fundamental truth about Hebrew. It's like, well, let's get a better language that's more true, more ancient. There isn't one. So if you're trying to find the most fundamental, basic, original truth, it's got to be in Hebrew, and ancient Hebrew at that. Ancient Hebrew. So as this Israeli ambassador was looking around in Japanese history up there in Kyoto, as my recollection of the northern 10 tribes in 721 BC, when Assyria came in and tore the place apart and killed a bunch of people and took a bunch of people into captivity, they took them into what's basically now on the map, northern Iraq, southern Turkey sort of area. But then when Babylon came in and took over Assyria, even though they were one country, the king of Babylon was kind of like a renegade general of the Assyrians, and he conquered Assyria, made it one big country, which is now basically like Iraq. But then Media-Persia came in, which is basically what we recognize as Iran on the other side of the mountains. And they, with Darius, they conquered Babylon and took over the whole area. And then in about the 300s BC is when Alexander the Great, or the Macedonian, came in from Greece and he conquered Media-Persia. But the point is, just to give some bearing of history, when Babylon conquered Assyria, a bunch of the captives that were Israelite took off running. It's like whenever you have a change of regime like that, change of culture, the prison doors are open and stuff happens. And a bunch of them went running north. Well, where'd they run? There's a pass in the mountains that's even to this day known as forget the exact term, but it's the Pass of the Hebrews. And so even historically in that area, it goes up into the Caucasus Mountains. And there's a group called the Black Hebrew Israelites, and they say, look at all the Jews, all the Israelites were actually of called it the Negroid, the black-skinned, black pigmented people groups. But the people that went up through the Caucasus Mountains became known as Caucasians. And David was, it says in English, King James, of a ruddy complexion, which is red, and Esau was red-haired. And so it's like, what's going on? But remember, Jacob had 4 wives. Well, 2 wives were sisters, Rachel and Leah. But then they had 2 maids, and those 2 maids could have been of a completely different race. The point is, the family of these 12 tribes is quite a blend of racial characteristics. And you can't tell from looking at skin color who you're with. And even if you could be a proselyte, a sojourner, and say, hey, I want to be one of them. And Yahuwah in the Torah said, for the proselyte, the sojourner that wants to be Israel, there's one Torah, not 2, not Old Covenant, New Covenant, not Jew and Christian. And then the New Testament talks about this concept of one new man. And so Sid Roth talks about this thing on his radio show or TV, I guess, that he had for many years. One new man. What does that mean, one new man? How's that going to happen? Well, it's talked about in Ezekiel 37, which we're going to get to here shortly. but I'm just trying to give a staging of history for a reason, the reason for doing this. So you get these Israelites escaping their captivity from Assyria, escaping Media Persia, Babylon. Alexander the Great comes in and they run up there, and Gene Scott did a whole study of this history, these people groups. The Scythians are right up there, what would be southern southwest USSR, which is right around the Ukraine. I can't tell you exactly the areas, but the Scythians dressed in armor, they looked like medieval knights from Europe. Well, they became kind of the culture of warriors, which established what we think of as European knights of the chivalry era, King Arthur and such. And it's like, no, those were Scythians. They became the Saxons, which he said, Gene Scott was, remember years ago, was saying that, well, that's Isaac's sons. Isaac, that's right, Jacob and Esau and the sons of Isaac are the 12 tribes, and then they end up becoming known as Celts and Vikings and going up into Britain and Ireland. And so you got this British Israelite theory, Scotland and all, and some people say that's absolutely hogwash, that's wrong, there's no way, and other people say it's the absolute truth. And it's like, yeah, but those guys have made up a bunch of stuff, and they twist the meaning of scripture, and they twist the meaning of prophecy. And it's like other people would say, well, they're not twisting it, they're declaring it. And if you think it's twisted, because you don't know. And there's all this argument. I've heard about this stuff for 60 years. It's like, how do you find the truth? How do you find the truth of eschatology? And furthermore, Matthew, don't like dropping names, but the guy from Torah of the Tribes, he did this whole talk a few years ago about Khazaria. And it's like, who are the Khazarians? Well, they became known as the Ashkenazi, and there's a whole history of that. You can look that up, Khazaria, Khazarians. Anyway, well, they're right up there, right around this Caucasus place where the escaping Israelites went. Well, then who are those people? They decided to become Jews. They're not the Khazarians. Everybody hated the Khazarians. The Khazarians were like ruthless pirates. They were, apparently, from my understanding, they were vicious, mean, and nasty. They were thieves and liars and killers, and everybody hated them, and they were put under siege and then put under pressure to change their lifestyle. And they were told, you better get religion real fast or you're all going to be exterminated, genocided. And so they held council, and they had basically a choice between, should we become Jews or Christians or Muslims or Buddhists, or, take your pick, but you better pick something because you guys are too villainous. And they chose Judaism. They thought it was the closest thing to the truth or whatever. So that's how the Ashkenazi people group of culture became. They were the Khazarians who chose to become Jews. And then so some people say, well, they're not Jews at all. They're not blood lineage Jews. They're wannabes. They're invaders. And their DNA progeny, just so you know, what some people say, they're the ones running the government and the culture of the land of what we call Israel right now today. That the government of Israel, the state, what they call the state of Israel, are actually the Ashkenazi Khazarian Jews who aren't really Jews. And it's like, but they chose to become people that would regard the Torah. And if there's one Torah, then you can't sit there and say, no, you're not one of us. It's like, it doesn't work that way. Anybody who, whether you can trace your DNA or not, if you want Yahweh El He, then you are Ayin Mem, Israel. Yeah, but there's the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Well, they moved in and are occupying the seat of government for the southern kingdom. So there's this other, call it almost a race, the Sephardic Jews, and they say, the two are opposed. The Sephardic don't get along with the Ashkenazi, and there's quite a cultural conflict, almost like a Yankee and a rebel Confederate. In America, still, there's this animosity, this ingrained disturbance, innate almost, inherent opposition between the two cultures, even though they both believe the same thing. And then I've seen some Jewish guys living in Iran a few years ago and even recently saying, hey, those guys running the country, they're not us. They're a pretense of Jews. They're not kadosh. They're not acting like kadoshim elyonin, saints of the Most High, as that phrase is translated in English in Daniel. Kadoshim, that's the plural of the word kadosh. Elyon, hey, that's the Most High. So this phrase, I think it's in Daniel 7, that the fourth beast was supposed to, he had iron teeth and copper claws, and he chewed with his mouth and then stomped what remained with his feet. And he's going to exhaust or wear out the Kadoshim Elyonim, and it's translated saints of the Most High. And it's like, so we have in front of us this time of tribulation that's talked about by the New Testament. And it's like, who's this fourth beast and what's supposed to happen? And why would Yahweh himself, why would he let his kadosh ones, his saints of the Most High, why would he let them be chewed up and stomped up by the fourth monster? Why doesn't he rescue his people? If he's telling you, here, I'm going to give you an eschatology. I'm going to tell you what to expect, what's happening in the future. And what you can expect is that I'm going to be your champion, your Gabor, your Elohim. And I'm going to let the fourth monster chew you up and step all over you. Well, gee, thanks a lot. Is this what it means to be his people? No wonder they call him the big, mean, ugly monster God of the Old Testament. No wonder the promise of this future Savior, gentle, as it's called, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. No wonder he looks so much better. I mean, come on. I will never leave you or forsake you. And yet Yahweh always said in the Old Testament, if you guys don't knock it off, I'm going to completely turn my back and reject you and leave you. Did he say those words? Well, kind of, sort of. See, it all gets down into saying, what have we heard that he said? What did he really say? So what if the Khazarians are actually not some renegade bunch of savage, pirate-like, worst of the world, who are not really Jews that are running the government? What if they're actually the descendants of the northern 10 tribes who lost their identity, who somehow determined they wanted to come back, not to Judaism exactly, but Judaism was the only option, but they at least were coming back to the Torah, because Yahuwah had said, as we read through Ezekiel here, look at Ezekiel 36. We read through those verses within the last couple of weeks. He said, here's Yahuwah speaking to his people, the collection of the 12 tribes. He said, I gave you my truth. I gave you understanding of myself, who I am and what I'm about and how it all works. You alone, Israel, did I make myself known to out of all the peoples on the face of the earth. And you, Israel, are mine. You're my personal possession, unlike any other people group, like any other culture, any other nation. You're mine. Hence, this word Lamed is a prefix. Lamed Yod is a suffix, means myself, but Lamed Yahweh can mean belonging to Yahweh, or owned by Yahweh, or he belongs to me, or I am the creation of, or he's the one who caused me. So if it's Ani, Kadosh Ani. See, in Leviticus 19:2, Yahuwah says, I am Kadosh. It's Kadosh Ani. This word Alef Nun Yod, Ani, means I, personal. There the word Kadosh is spelled Kuf Dalet Vav Shin. And I can't tell you exactly when to stick a Vav or when to take out and just have it the 3 letters or to make it the 4. But he says, Kadoshim, you will be. Taya, Kadoshim, I think it's a Tav Hey Yod Hey. You, Kodashim, well, that's Kuf Dalet Shin Yod Mem. Yod Mem is the plural. So Leviticus 19:2, he says, Kadoshim Tayo, Ki Kadosh Ani. I am Kadosh, therefore you, Israel, your job, your mission, your identity, your only thing in life is to be kadosh, just like I am. And it's right there in Leviticus 19, where he says, therefore, you are not allowed to eat. Do not eat certain foods. Why? Because I'm kadosh, Yahuwah is saying, therefore you are to be kadosh, because you're supposed to be like mini-me. You're supposed to be my people, my representative. Your job, your only job in existence is to declare my identity, his praise, certainly his grandeur, his exaltation, his awesome wonder for those people who don't know him, to see him clearly, to see him distinctly as different, that kadosh, different than any alternative. And so this whole idea of saying he gave us the Sabbath day, Yom HaShabbat, the day of the Shabbat, it speaks of his identity. And when we were looking at Ezekiel 20, and it starts off saying the seventh year, the fifth month, the 10th day, hey, that's 7-10-5, that's, or 7-5-10, that's Zion Hey Yod, which literally is a word that spells my identity. It's all about his identity. And so in Ezekiel 36, where Yahuwah says, Israel, though I declared myself to you and I poured out all this blessing and I cleared out the land of the previous occupants because they were doing heinous offenses against, crimes against humanity, you could say, without elaborating on what those were, he said, so the land itself spewed them out and I gave you that land. You guys desecrated the land worse than they did. And you guys have so defamed me that nobody has a clue who I am, and it's intolerable. The land was not designed to give it to you just because you're a Jew, or just because you think you're one of the 12 tribes and so you get to sit here and do whatever you want. That's not what this is about. So you're out of here. Not only are you, by doing these criminal acts of injustice and unrighteousness, resh ayin, evil, resh sheen ayin, evil, wicked, harm, injury, not only by you doing that is your own ways going to come back on your own head, but he said, I'm going to call in the worst people I can find. The word is pirates, in plural is piratzim, and that's where we get the word in English, pirates, which were the Assyrians. He says they break things, they hurt people, and they're the worst, cruelest, most violent people, like the word Hamas, on the face of the earth, and I'm going to call them in to tear you, Israel, apart. First, it was the northern 10 tribes, and then he called in Nebuchadnezzar. He said, the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, is my own personal drawn sword. Yahweh said that. It's like he could throw down lightning bolts. He could send a plague. He could send 10 plagues like he did with Egypt. But he chose to send the sword of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian armies. That's the way he operates. He sends in the hornets. The hornet swarm are his messengers. He has all kinds of means at his disposal. But my point is, he told Israel, because you guys have defiled my identity in the eyes of the other nations, I'm going to show who I am. I'm not going to tolerate you perpetuating this false, call it a false narrative, a false teaching. If they're known as the people of Yahuwah Elohim and you behave like this, that's wrong, that's counterfeit. Therefore, I'm going to destroy you so that everybody else knows that I'm not going to condone what you're saying. I'm not going to validate what you're saying. That's what he's been saying all through the scriptures here. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28 says the same thing. He says, if you find my ways to be abhorrent, detestable, a reproach, a stench, or whatever, casual disregard, that's it. You're done. You're not my people. You have broken the covenant. You have rejected the terms, this oath, the stipulations of our agreement. The word dabar is translated word or speech, but it also means terms and stipulations of agreement. The exact same meaning of the word Alef Vav Tav, which is translated oat or oath, which is also a letter of the alphabet. So I look at the letters of the alphabet somehow as symbols which represent the terms and stipulations of the contract covenant in truth between Yahoo and Israel. And the entire grievance between Yahweh and Israel, in the entire Bible, in the entire Tanakh, the Old Testament, both the writings, the prophets, the Torah, it's all, who is Yahweh Zavot? Who is he? What is his identity? Don't show me a picture of a man, a face, and say, that's your God. Don't carve a bull or a calf out of gold or any other metal, or don't even put jewels on it and say that's your deity. That's not him. Can't be him. It's an offense to him. So how is Israel supposed to put on display their Elohim? By behaving in righteousness, Zadika, truth and kindness. And then the balancing of scales, which is righteousness, Mishpat. So these four things Yahuwah repeats all the time, Zadika and Mishpat. Well, Mishpat is translated in the ISR or Hallelujah as right rulings. It's like, right rulings. What are right rulings? It's like, right rulings. It's like, what is that? We got to redefine it. I heard, as I mentioned last week, I heard somebody on the radio say, justification, this big, long word of theology, means justice, which means mishpat, which means balance the scales. Well, how do you balance the scales? Well, mem, shin, pei, tet. Pei, tet, if you look in the Klein's dictionary, it means stalemate. Like you're playing chess and everybody's wiped out each other's pieces and you just have two kings. One king can't possibly trap the other one because of the way the pieces move. You're now at a stalemate. Nobody wins, nobody loses. Nobody has any advantage over the other guy, like a tie score, 20-20. So you have a tiebreaker. You run the sports event a little bit longer, so somebody has to score, and then they win, and the other guy loses. Okay, now you've got it tipped scales. But balanced scales are a complete stalemate. So we were talking about, might have been Ezekiel 37, where Yahweh says, I'm going to bring you into the wilderness of the nations and contend with you there and make you pass under the rod. And it's like, oh man, it's like Dad taking you out to the woodshed and beating you with a switch. And it's like, oh gosh. So that's what he's going to do. Well, and as we talked about the other week or so ago, that I'm going to bring you to the wilderness of the nations. Well, the word wilderness is Bamidbar or midbar. Bet means in, so mem, dalet, bet, resh. Well, mem is a place, and dalet, bet, resh is words, place of words, the location to objectify words. That's doing a language study to talk about the language and consider how the whole language works is Bamidbar. And the word nations there isn't Aleph Mem, meaning nation, and it's not Goy or Goyim, meaning various other nations who think differently because they talk differently. It's Ayin Mem Yod Mem. Well, Ayin Mem is the opposite of Goyim. It means kindred peoples. So it's not really the word nations at all. It's the language of the kinsfolk. Well, that's Hebrew. He says, I'm going to extract you from the lands where I'd scattered you and bring you to the language of the kinsfolk of the 12 tribes, the language of the 12 tribes, and I'm going to contend with you there. Well, that word contend, as we looked at, was nun, shin, pei, tet. Well, that's balance the scales. I'm gonna balance everything out. I'm going to even it all up so it's perfectly clear, perfectly fair, perfectly right. That's a good thing. It's translated contend like he's going to give us all a whooping. That's not what it says. I'm going to make you pass under the rod. that word rod can also mean a bat or a cudgel or something to club you with, but it also means to diversify into tribes. I'm going to place you guys into tribes. What tribes? The 12 tribes. It's kind of like there's 12 doors, 12 gateway entrances to the New Jerusalem in Revelation 22. And none of them are Baptist, Presbyterian, Catholic, Orthodox, Lutheran. They're the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. So for him to say, I'm going to separate you into tribes and restore the language to you once I extract you from the nations, where I scattered you with a strong hand. I believe this is verse 38 of Ezekiel 20. Let me open that up, and that's where we had stopped at one point last week or 2 weeks ago. So it all depends on how you translate the words, what you're expecting. Therefore, verse 38 of Ezekiel 20, thus say this to the house of Israel. Now, is that the northern kingdom? Well, if that's the northern kingdom, or is that all 12? If this is the house of Israel, the northern kingdom, then he's not talking to Yehuda, but he might be talking about to the Khazarians. And what I was going to say about Kyoto, what the guy found was that here we only have record of, boy, these northern 10 tribes escaping from being in captivity in Assyria, go up the Caucasus Mountains, become known as the Scythians, the Saxons, go through Europe. They actually became known as the various Vandals and Visigoths and all those guys that sacked Rome a few centuries later. The barbarian tribes, the Celts, they were all the house of Israel, given other names, Vikings. But a bunch of them went east, and they went east through Mongolia and through what's now Korea and into Japan, and they settled in Japan. So what's called the Shinto religion, which I don't know anything about, but I did see something at one time where they were talking about that, and they have the priests, they have this little round box. Well, the Jews carry a little square box, the phylacteries and tefillin, and they have fringed robes, and a bunch of their customs look like the same thing. So if we say, well, the Hebrew roots of the Christian faith, in Japan, they could be talking about the Hebrew roots of the Shinto faith. And that there's a little mirror, from what I understood years ago, there was a mirror up in the most sacred temple in Japan, Shinto temple. You go through this gate that looks like the letter Het, like people's estates in Montana have the same sort of thing with 2 posts and a header log across the top. And on this mirror is written in Hebrew letters, Yod Hei Vav Hei. Why is that? Why is Yod Hei Vav Hei written in Hebrew letters on a mirror at the most sacred place in the shrine, the temple of this Shinto? And yet we, myself as a Christian American, I haven't got a clue what those guys are doing, what they think, what they believe. It's absolutely foreign to me, but they might be closer than I could have ever dreamed. So this isn't about alienation. This is about how do we be the people of Yahuwah? What does that mean? And if he says, I'm going to, with a strong hand, I'm going to scatter you across the face of the earth. Then he says, with the same strong hand, I'm going to pick you up and bring you back. So here, thus says, this is verse 30 of Ezekiel 20. Thus says Adonai Yahweh, do you defile yourselves in the manner of your forefathers and go astray after their abominations? It's our culture, it's our history. Somebody has to say, okay, no more. I'm going to stop the profane abominations that I inherited through my forefathers of culture, whether it's Greek, Roman, Oriental, Christian, American. I'm going to stop it. And I'm going to come back to the truth. And by giving your gifts, by passing your children through the fire, you defile yourselves unto all your idols to this day. Should I relate to your inquiries? Should I allow myself to be droshed, sought of by you? O house of Israel, as I live, Nam Adonai Yahweh, I swear that I will not, this says, relate to your inquiries or allow myself to be sought by you. That was verse 3. So we go down, as for what enters your minds, verse 32, it shall not be, as for what you say, we will be like the nations, like the families of the lands, to worship wood and stone. No, that's not an option for Israel. As I live, Nam Adonai Yahweh, I swear that I will rule over you with a strong hand and outstretched arm with outpoured wrath. I will take you out from the nations and gather you from the lands to which you were scattered with a strong hand, outstretched arm, and outpoured wrath. Well, see, that's the turnaround. He took people out of his land, he says, because you've desecrated the land, and he threw them across the face of the earth. And that's the same Zion Rash Ayin Zerah, which is the word for seed or progeny. He said, like a man throws seed with this arm that throws the seed across the face of the earth. That's what he did to the seed of Israel. And then someday in the future, that same outstretched arm with this strong hand, he's going to gather them up. And that's what we're reading here. And that hasn't happened yet. And yet I know there's a book written, Exodus 2, and there's a book written that, oh, all the Jews that have come back to the lands, that's proof that he's fulfilled that prophecy. I'm still out here. So that doesn't mean he has not brought us all back to the land. And I will, this is verse 35, Exodus or Ezekiel 20, and I will bring you to the wilderness of the nations. That's the verse we're just talking about. And I will contend, that's Nun Shin Pei Tet, balance the scales with you there face to face, just as I contended with your forefathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt. So I will contend with you. Nam Adonai Yahweh. I will make you pass under the rod. Well, that means divided into tribes and bring you into the bond of the covenant. Hasn't done that yet. I will separate from among you those who rebel and those who transgress against me. I will take them out of the land of their sojourning. That means he'll pick us up from here, wherever, whether it's Japan or America or Australia or Argentina, but they will not come to the soil of Israel. Then you'll know that I am Yahweh. Why does he say, then you'll know I am Yahweh? Like I said, he says that all the time through Ezekiel, is because he's saying, when I do what I said I was going to do, because the name Yahuwah means he will do what he says, or he will cause it to exist. What the Yod, the hand, has expressed, it's connected with expressing. Like Yehi-or, 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 and Yehi-or. It's translated, let there be light, and there was light, but it's not let there be and there was. That's English. It's light exists. Vav, and connected, light exists. When he says it, it happens, period. He says, then you'll know I'm Yahweh. Every time he says, I'm going to give you a prophecy. I'm going to do this. And when it happens, then you'll know. Then you'll get it. He's the guy who does what he says. So for us to get it now, okay, he does what he says. He said, if our forefathers betrayed him, worshipped other deities, sacrificed their children to idols, profaned, violated the land, learned the customs of the other peoples, he was going to destroy them, eject them out of the land, and then bring them back. Well, he did destroy them and eject them out of the land. The land is still barren today, looks like rocks. In every movie you see, every picture you see, all this desert. It was supposed to look like the land of the Garden of Eden. That's why Lot moved there, because it was so lush, and then Sodom and Gomorrah got blown with the sulfur and brimstone, and the place is burned up. It can't grow. Well, he's going to make it grow. That's what he said. It hasn't happened yet. Hasn't happened yet. This isn't the end of the world. We're at the point of taking a break. Then I'll pick up again with, it's hard to see here, verse 39. So who's doing the recording? Does somebody want to hit the...
I am.
Okay, you
Yes,
want to hit the...
stop? I was trying to show you, but I don't know if you went through. All right, I'll stop recording now.